welcome to another episode of Read It with Whiskey. I am your host, Laura Juntunen, and today we have our first international self-published author with us, Shana Caldwell. So Shana is a young adult paranormal fiction author, and recently she's branched away from her normal fiction writing and she started writing fantasy. She is self-published in Australia, and her first novel is Immortal Awakening, which is the first of a three-part series. This includes Immortal Awakening, Immortal Suffering, and an upcoming release of Immortal Reckoning. She just recently finished up some of those drafts for that final book, so we're really excited to see that coming out. This series is a dystopian vampire series, and they're the first books that she had written that opened up so many more possibilities to continue her writing. So she was really inspired through writing these books. And in early 2021, very, very soon as of this publication, she's going to be putting out her first fantasy book, Enchantment of Darkness, on March 16th. So if you are listening to this podcast episode prior to March 16th, 2021, you can go ahead and jump into the pre-orders. All the links will be in the description below. And Enchantment of Darkness is the book that we're going to be talking about today. It is a fantasy novel. It is right up my alley. I really enjoyed reading this book, and I think you'll really enjoy the conversation that we had. Let's get into the episode. Welcome to Read It with Whiskey, an interview podcast highlighting self-published authors. I am your host, Laura Juntunen. The purpose behind this podcast is to help authors grow their audience while also introducing readers to their new favorite authors. Let's get to know the person behind the page. Sit back, sip some whiskey, and lean in to these self-published authors. All right, a little update for Laura J Live. So my first book in the Shockwave series, Transient Pulse, is coming out on March 28th, and it is getting so close. Sorry if you can hear my bunny in the background. He's scratching my desk. So this is my first fiction book that is coming out, and it is releasing on March 28th. All of the pre-orders are up right now, so there are links in the description here for the podcast, in the show notes, where you can pre-order this book. I'm really excited to get it out there, and as of right now, I'm still looking for a few more ARC readers. So ARC readers are advanced reviewer copy holders, and what they do is they read the book, and in exchange, they put an honest review on Amazon for me. So if you are interested in being an ARC reader, you can click the link in the show notes to apply. I have limited spaces, but I would love for you to reach out. If the spots are filled, I can always put you on the list for book 2, which will be coming out later this year. All right, there's not many updates for you today. We're going to keep it short and sweet today. So let's just jump into that interview with Shana. Welcome, Shana, to Read It with Whiskey. Thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on the show. And you are actually my first international author that we are interviewing. So I was really excited that we were able to connect. It is 7 a.m. my time, 10 p.m. your time. So we're both tired for different reasons. All right. So we're just going to jump straight in. Before we talk about your books in detail, first of all, why did you decide that you wanted to be a writer?
I think I sort of decided I wanted to be a writer when I was like 16. It sort of just sprung me, and I'm like, well, I have no real motive for anything else. I like to be creative. I was like, so maybe I can make something out of that. And now that like I'm on my third book, I'm like, well, if people are like relating to my stories and what I have to tell with them, then like I'm helping other people as well.
Yeah, definitely purpose behind the creativity. And so you are on your third book. So you have Immortal Awakening, Immortal Suffering. There's going to be a third book in that series, Immortal Reckoning, correct?
Yep.
But the book we're going to talk most about today is The Enchantment of Darkness, because that's the one I read. But before we get there, first, can you tell our listeners, what is that Immortal series about? What is that book series about?
Okay, so the Immortal Awakening series is about a dystopian world, vampires, other sort of paranormal creatures that I've created from nothing pretty well. And you follow the path of Allison, the main character. And she's this human girl, has nothing fends for herself, and she gets mixed up with two vampires and pretty well has to like find the truth through the first book of who she can trust, and she realizes the humans aren't as great as she believes they are. There's like a big twist at the end that I can't say because it'll spoil it. But
cool. That sounds, I think I'm going to have to dive into that series next. So that's the Immortal Awakening series. And that's more of a paranormal type series. And so Enchantment of Darkness is your first fantasy novel, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So tell our listeners, what is Enchantment of Darkness about?
Okay, so Enchantment of Darkness is about Raven Morgan. She's just a normal human village girl living day by day, helping out her family. And their village is ruled over by a fairy king. And one fateful day, she runs into his son, not realizing, and invites him to her home. And pretty well, everything spirals from her meeting Nyx, the main character, on his side. And then she goes on this journey of self-discovery to learn more about herself. And then she also has to fend off the creature that is attacking the children of her village. And she must trust Nyx to help her with that.
Oh, I love it. There's so many things where I'm like, oh, I want to talk about that, but I don't want to give it away. And this book's coming out March 16th. And there is a pre-order up online, right?
Yeah. It's currently on Amazon for the pre-order, but I will be opening up my website pre-order soon.
Awesome. So exciting. Okay. So Enchantment of Darkness, where did the inspiration come for this story?
I honestly, it's the weirdest thing. Like, I was at work packing potatoes, and like, when I write my books, I don't plot them. I sort of just write them, and the characters sort of whisper in my ears. And all of a sudden, I wasn't packing potatoes. I was walking up this muddy slope. It was raining, and I was hauling a heavy bucket of wheat with me. And I was like, okay, I need to tell this story. And it sort of just spiraled.
I love that. And I remember that scene so vividly because that's definitely, obviously, it's an important part because she meets Nyx at that point in the story. So, and really quick, so some of our listeners might not know, so there's a fairy king and his son is Nyx. So can you explain to the listeners what a fairy actually is? Because I think some people might be a little confused on that.
Okay, so the fairies in my book are probably different to like your traditional fairies sort of thing. In my book, they have magic, and I delve deeper into the magic system in the second book for the series. But obviously, like your normal traits, pointed ears, like powers. Never say thank you to a fairy because they hold the oath against you. And in Enchantment of Darkness, when you travel to a fairy, it actually strips away the glamour they carry on themselves in the human world to like blend in with the humans.
I thought that was a really interesting part. I loved when they traveled, and it brought a whole new perspective, obviously, to the story because they're in a whole nother world, essentially, in that part of the story. And then something else that I really liked that had definitely a role in the storyline was that they can't lie either. So that I really liked that little detail too. And you already mentioned it a little bit. So your writing process is kind of just jumping into it, finding out the characters as they come along. So was there any particular person in real life that inspired any of the characters for this book?
No, not really. I can't say any of the books I've written are inspired from people I know. Like, it sounds so crazy when I say it out loud, but I'm like, oh, there's voices in my head telling me to write all these things, but it's like the easiest way to explain it.
Yeah, it's like intuition. It's just this, they've always been around, and now you're just putting them down on paper.
Yeah. And then once I tell their story, they sort of like, okay, someone else can come forward and take over.
I love that. So when you were in the middle of Immortal Awakening in that series, is that what kind of happened? Is these characters just kind of popped up out of nowhere? Is that why you decided to write this book?
Yeah, well, when I first wrote Immortal Awakening, I didn't think it would become as serious. I'm like, okay, write the first book and I'll probably never write again, sort of thing. I was like, get it out of my system. But then in the first book, a character came to me, and it's the Vampire King, and he comes for Alison pretty well. And I was like, okay, he has a story I need to tell. So in the second book, it's a split point of view between his point of view and hers.
Mm-hmm.
So now the story is like completely hijacked. He's completely hijacked my story, and
right.
It's like, you know what? We're telling it like this now.
I love that. And so you wrote that first book in Immortal Awakening, and you didn't know you're going to write more, but then you just said a little bit ago, Enchantment of Darkness has a second book as well. Do you know how many are going to be in this series?
So far there's 2.
Okay.
The second book is Enchantment of Thorns, and it's set, I think I'm going to have 50 years or so from the ending of Enchantment of Darkness, and it's in Ravensdaughter's point of view. Mm-hmm. And it really delves into the magic system. We meet a bunch of new characters. Love the main broody female.
I'm excited. We were talking on Instagram, and you gave me a little insight into what the second book was about, and I'm so excited for it to come out. So do you know a timeline for when that one's going to be published? Obviously, Enchantment of Darkness is coming out in March 2021. So do you have an idea for the second one?
I'm hoping towards the end of the year. I have to hand the script into my editor, but I think Immortal Reckoning will come before the second book for Enchanted.
Okay. That makes sense. Kind of get them all out, the Immortal Awakening series.
Yep.
And you are self-publishing all of these books. And so why did you decide that you want to do self-publishing versus a traditional route?
Well, I figured with like my age, because I was 18 when I first published Immortal Awakening. I figured with my age, I was like, I don't think I have like quite the experience or like what's the word I'm looking for? Like I don't have the thing to like.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. Yeah. So it's almost like the traditional publishers. Obviously, they don't know who you are. This is your first book. Kind of like that experience is what you don't have yet. But I gotta say, I'm thinking you're going to do really big things, because I loved Enchantment of Darkness, and so I'm going to go back and read the other ones. And self-publishing and that's a great thing about self-publishing, is that you can choose when you're putting out the books, and you can choose all of the concepts within it, cover design, all that stuff. And speaking of, I love the cover designs for all of your books. Do you use a specific cover designer, or do you do it yourself, or how does that go?
For the Immortal series, I'm gonna say her name wrong. I'm so sorry. Salome. Her name's Morgan something on Instagram. Oh, I feel so bad.
It's okay.
And she did really great, because I'm an avid reader, obviously. Mm-hmm. Love reading. She's done really amazing artworks for books I've read. And I like hit her up for the second cover. I've actually got the second cover of the book, and I was like, yes, I need
it's so pretty.
I know. But for Enchantment of Darkness, I got cover Dungeon Rabbit on Instagram, and she's amazing to work with.
Okay, and I'll link all of these in the podcast description, so then people can go and check them out too. Cool. Yeah, I loved your book cover. And when I read the book, you hadn't had the book cover out yet. And so when I finished it, you were able to share that with me, and I was so excited. And now it's out for everyone to see. By the time this episode goes out, your book will be right about to be published, about a week before. So let's go into a little bit more detail of Enchantment of Darkness. We talked about a little bit, but I did have some specific questions. Specifically, this is fantasy, but there's a little bit of dark fantasy in it. There's death and some heartache, definitely. So is any of that tied to personal experience, or is anything in your real life kind of an inspiration for how the darkness comes into it?
I would say with like Raven having lost her sister and having to deal with the grief of that guilt would probably sort of relate to, like, I wasn't close with my auntie because I was like a baby when she died, but she was only 19 at the time. and I've seen the grief my family still carries from that. So I sort of wanted to include that in Raven's grief with wanting to try and help the other children when she couldn't help her sister, like I couldn't help my auntie, sort of thing.
Definitely correlates. And I just want to talk all the details of the book, but we can't give away too many spoilers. Okay, so we talked a little bit about it with the fairy world. So there's the world where Raven lives, and then the world that Nyx is from. Where did the inspiration for those separate worlds come from?
I wanted them to be in the same sort of world but have the split dimensions. In a book I sort of started writing a few years ago, another fantasy type book, but her cubby house was actually like a portal to a different world. So I sort of elaborated on that idea and just sort of made it the portal that can change between the two realms.
Okay.
But same sort of time.
Right. I like that. And then there is kind of a time difference, or when you're in one world, time moves differently in the other world.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
I think I just made it up. I was like,
I love
it.
What?
It's gonna, yeah.
I know, as a writer, sometimes people ask you questions and you're like, I have no idea. I just thought it up, and it was a good idea.
Yeah, that was me. I was like, you know what? She's going to be here for 3 days and it's going to be 2 weeks.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And something else I really liked was that a lot of the things that Raven went through can relate back to our world, our present time, like the nightlife. I really liked that she likes to go out and dance and go to bars and have a good time. And that definitely was something that I could relate to, even though it's a fantasy book. I just thought that was really interesting. And then something I talked to you about on Instagram before we even booked our interview here is the necklace that is a big part of the story. And do you think that's ever going to be something that you'll create for your readers to purchase in the future?
I was actually thinking about it. I would love to just have it as something like on my website for people to buy, but I think I'd want to make them myself and like carve out the like crystals myself and like do it all like that. So it's definitely like a future investment.
I like that. Well, if it happens, I'm going to get one. Because I love how the necklace is tied into a lot of the storyline, and it's an important piece, even though it's just like a little item. I love when that kind of thing happens in books.
And it's on the front cover.
Right, exactly. It's on the beautiful front cover. I love it. Okay, so one other thing that I asked you in like the pre-interview questions was where some inspiration came from. And you mentioned that you wrote a book when you were 13. So, and you said, oh, thank God I never let anybody read that. So do you think you might be able to edit it and actually publish it? Or is it something where it's like, nope, I'm just going to throw that away?
It's like such a train wreck. Like you read it and you're like, oh my God, who let you touch a computer? But I have Wattpad, so sometimes I like fiddle around with my ideas on there, like some side inspiration. And I sort of started a little rewrite of the book I wrote because it's a werewolf, bad boy, good girl.
All of the drama of a 13-year-old.
Yes. So I can salvage it, but it would be like a complete rewrite, like have the old script and like a blank page. Right. Take the ideas, make them better.
Yeah, that would be interesting. And then you can say, oh, I started this when I was 13. It took a while.
It took like 10 years.
I love it. And okay, something that I wanted to touch on was, what do your readers not know about you that you can share with them?
Okay. What do they not know about me? I love tattoos. I've got a few. This one's from the Holly Black series, the Cruel Prince series. I did professional gymnastics when I was like 8. I didn't last. I went to guitar, didn't last. Went to flute, didn't last. Went to horse riding, and I think that lasted the longest out of all my hobbies. So I'm sort of like a hobby jumper.
Okay.
And I love heavy metal music.
Oh, I love it. and now you are into writing. So hopefully this one lasts and it's long term. And so what do you do for work right now?
I work at Coles, which is an Australian big supermarket company. I've been there for like 6 years now. I started in the deli, moved to checkout. I was fresh produce manager there for a while, but now I'm back just doing like deli checkout chick, basic customer service.
The reason I bring it up is because hopefully this isn't just a hobby and you do writing long term. Is that one of your future goals, is to be able to quit your day job and be able to write full time?
Yes, I would die. I would literally explode.
I know, me too. I think that's the goal for any self-published author, right? All right, so it wouldn't be Read It with Whiskey without talking a little bit about whiskey. So what is your favorite whiskey?
Scotch whiskey. Even though I'm not much of a drinker, it would be that one.
I love it. All right. And Shana, can you please tell our listeners, where can they find you? Where can they find all of your books to purchase?
Okay, you can find me on my Instagram under Shana J. Caldwell Books. You can find my Facebook. I think it's under Shana J. Caldwell. And you can find Immortal Awakening and Immortal Suffering on Amazon, Books A Million, Booktopia, I think maybe Barnes and Noble, and Dimmicks, but I think that's an Australian book company. I don't think America has Dimmicks.
I haven't heard of it, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
And then Enchantment of Darkness it is pre-ordered on Amazon right now, and that'll be out on the 16th of March. Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for being on Read It with Whiskey. I had fun.
That's okay. Thank you. This was so fun for my first podcast. I actually really enjoyed it.
I'm so happy. Thank you so much for stopping in today and listening to this episode. Shana and I had such a great time talking, and I'm really excited to see what her next book holds. I'm so excited to dive into it. So I will definitely keep you guys updated on what she has in the future, and hopefully we'll have her back on the show. And a few quick reminders before I take off today. Go ahead and reach out to me if you have any kind of questions that you would like me to answer here in the podcast. I am taking questions, and I may do some spin-off Q&A episodes. We shall see. But if you want some more intel or more information about any of these authors, the best way to do that is to become a patron. So you can go to www.patreon.com/readitwithwhiskey. There are 3 different tiers that you can choose from, and all 3 tiers have different benefits. Some of those include video content, extra sneak peek episodes, and some indie author updates from me that are exclusive to my patrons. So if you're interested in any of that kind of information and you would like to support this podcast, please go to that link. The link is in the show notes. And also, I would really, really appreciate it if you could share this podcast with your friends, share certain episodes with people who like certain genres. And I'm sorry if you can hear the bunnies in the background. They're chewing on a stick. Oh my goodness. If you want some photos of the bunnies, I will link all of their stuff in the description below as well. All right, but back to what I was saying. I would really appreciate you to review my podcast on whatever podcast platform that you listen in on. I'd really appreciate the support. It really helps podcasts grow when people are sharing and rating and talking about the podcast episodes. So go ahead and share this episode on Instagram if you enjoyed it. Go ahead, tag Shana in it, tag me. I have 2 Instagrams, at Laura J Live and at Read It with Whiskey. I would just really appreciate your support. All right, and next week we are going to be diving into a nonfiction book by Holly Terry. It's entitled Power Boundaries, and this is a very in-depth look at some boundaries that you have to place for your own happiness, for the happiness of those around you. And I just had such a great time talking with Holly. So if you are into nonfiction or you just want to try something different, definitely stay tuned for next week. All right, I will talk to you then. Have a good one.